I'm not someone who believes in ghosts or anything supernatural. But what happened to me one winter night scared me more than any ghost story ever could. It was a Friday, and I had the house to myself. My parents were on a weekend trip, and my sister was at a sleepover. I'd planned a typical night: takeout, some gaming, maybe watching a movie. The house is on the edge of our town, pretty secluded, surrounded by woods. It's quiet, which I usually like. I was in the middle of a game when I first heard it. The front door handle jiggling. I paused my game and listened. Nothing. I figured it was the wind. It had been pretty stormy all day. I went back to my game, but then I heard it again. More aggressive this time. I muted the TV and tiptoed to the window next to the door, peering out from the corner of the curtain. There was a man at the door. Late 30s maybe, wet from the rain, trying to see inside. Panic didn't hit immediately. Instead, I felt this weird calmness and thought maybe he needed help. But something stopped me from opening the door. Instead, I turned on the porch light, hoping it would scare him off. It didn't. He looked straight up at the window where I was hiding, like he knew I was there all along. Then he smiled. That smile wasn't friendly. It was chilling, like he had some dark secret. He left the porch, but instead of relief, I felt my stomach knot up. I rushed to lock all the doors and windows. I checked them twice. Then, moving away from the front, I decided to make sure the back door was bolted. As I passed the kitchen window, I saw him again, just standing in my backyard, looking up. He saw me too, and his creepy smile returned. That's when I decided to call the police. The operator told me to stay on the line and hide somewhere safe. The next 30 minutes were the longest in my life. I heard him trying to open the back door, then the windows. Each noise was like a hammer to my chest. The police arrived, sirens off, lights off, just as silently as the man had appeared. They caught him trying to pick the lock on the back door. Turns out, he was known to them, a burglar with a history of violent crime. What shook me the most was hearing that he had a knife and a gun on him when they arrested him. They said he was likely looking for an easy target, saw the lights on, and hoped for an unlocked door. After that night, everything changed for me. I couldn't be alone in the house, not even during the day. I never thought being home alone could scare me. I'm pretty independent and I've stayed by myself plenty of times. But one night changed everything. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. My parents had gone to visit some friends, and my brother was at a concert. They wouldn't be back until late, so I had the house to myself. Our place is a bit old, creaky, and has lots of character. It's usually comforting. I settled in with a movie, but halfway through, the Wi-Fi started acting up. Typical for our rural spot, especially on windy nights. I paused the movie to reset the router in the basement when I noticed the basement door was slightly ajar. That was odd. We always keep it closed. I shrugged it off, figuring my brother had left it open earlier. As I was heading down the stairs, I heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs. I froze. The movie was paused. There should have been no sound. I listened closer, and it happened again. Definitely footsteps, but heavier, like boots. My first thought was, maybe my brother came back early, but then I remembered he'd taken his keys, and I hadn't heard the door. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. My heart started racing, but I convinced myself it was just the house settling or my imagination. I went down, reset the router, and hurried back up. The footsteps started again as soon as I reached the main floor, this time moving towards the kitchen. I grabbed the nearest thing to a weapon I could find, a screwdriver from the drawer, and tiptoed toward the kitchen. What I saw made my blood run cold. The silhouette of a man, broad and tall, was reflected against the window. He was inside my house. I ducked behind the sofa, heart thumping in my chest. I didn't have my phone. It was charging upstairs. As I pondered my next move, The floorboards creaked loudly right beside me. He was in the same room. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. Suddenly, the lights went out. The whole house plunged into darkness. I heard him moving around, the soft but distinct sound of someone trying not to be heard. It was pitch black, and I realized he must have cut the power. I felt trapped and helpless, knowing I had to escape before he found me. Using the darkness as cover, I crawled towards the staircase, praying with each movement he wouldn't hear me. As I reached the stairs, a car's headlights swept through the front window. It was my parents coming back. I've never felt relief like that. I bolted upright and screamed for help. My parents rushed in, turning on flashlights, and the intruder took off through the back door. The police arrived minutes later, but he was gone. They found a back window forced open. He'd been planning this, waiting for someone to be alone. We later learned he had hit several homes in the area, always when someone was alone. He never took much, seemed to relish the fear more than anything. The silence of a house now echoes with the memory of footsteps, and I doubt it'll ever feel the same again. Always listen to those little signs, and never assume you're as alone as you think. Living alone has its perks until the night falls, and every sound becomes a potential threat. This happened to me last winter, which turned my comfortable solitude into a nightmare that still lingers. It was a particularly cold December evening, and snow was forecasted to fall heavily throughout the night. I planned to hunker down with some hot chocolate and binge-watch a series. The wind was howling outside, typical of a winter storm, but it added a cozy contrast to my warm living room. Around 9 p.m., as I was getting settled, I noticed I'd left some laundry in the dryer in the basement. I paused my show and headed down to fetch it. The basement is always a bit eerie, especially at night, but I brushed off the uneasy feeling and quickly grabbed my clothes. As I turned off the light and headed back upstairs, I thought I heard what sounded like a faint whisper. I stopped, listened. Nothing. It must have been the wind, I reasoned, or the old pipes. Back upstairs, I made some hot chocolate and resumed my show. The wind seemed to be getting fiercer, howling and shaking the windows. At some point, amidst the noise of the storm, I heard a soft click. It was so subtle that I almost didn't notice it. But then it came again. Click, like a door gently latching shut. My heart skipped a beat. I lived alone, and all the doors were supposed to be locked. I paused the show and sat frozen, straining my ears for more sounds. Nothing. After a couple of minutes of nerve-wracking silence, I mustered the courage to check the house. I grabbed the flashlight just in case the power went out and started with the front door. Locked. Windows, all secured. I made my way through each room, increasingly convinced I'd imagined the sound. Returning to the living room, I decided it was just my mind playing tricks, amplified by the storm. I settled back into my couch, trying to focus on the show. But as I watched, I noticed something odd. A slight movement in the reflection of the TV screen. It was subtle, a shift in the shadows of the hallway behind me. My heart froze. Turning slowly, I flashed the light down the hall. It was empty. Determined to prove to myself I was alone, I did one more walkthrough of the house, this time checking every possible hiding spot. As I entered the guest room, which I rarely use, I finally found the source of my unease. The window wasn't just unlocked, it was slightly open. Snow had drifted onto the sill, pushed in by the wind. The realization hit me hard. I hadn't checked this window in weeks. Someone could have easily used it to enter while I was in the basement. Panic surged through me as I thought about the whispers and the clicks. With shaking hands, I closed and locked the window, then checked the room thoroughly. Nothing seemed disturbed, and there was no one there. I called the police, and they advised me to stay somewhere else for the night. They found no signs of forced entry, but the officer agreed that the open window in such bad weather was concerning. I stayed with a friend and returned the next day, but the fear lingered. The thought that someone might have been inside the house while I was there, watching me unknowingly, was deeply unsettling. From that night on, I double-checked every lock before sunset. The lesson was clear. Always be aware of your surroundings, even in the comfort of your own home.